Good morning, happy Wednesday, party people in the house. It's your favorite back here talking Texas Longhorns as Texas prepares to play against Georgia this weekend. One more road trip for us. We'll see if there's some more down the line. And then I got a Steve Sarkisian's conversation. I'm going to get started. I'm going to be the warm-up back. Jeff Ketchum will probably be the headliner at noon because he's going to have more on that. But I started it. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the playoff stuff that came out last night. Now that we've had a good 12 hours or so to kind of think about it, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. 100% appreciate everybody. So as we start this conversation and we start thinking about Texas and Georgia this weekend, I started doing a little bit of research, a little bit of original research on Unk's end. And I want to start the conversation by this. It's interesting that several weeks ago I had the question to Sark about play calling, right? And my question to him was, hey, why in this era of college football where there's so much on your plate, have you ever just considered like delegating that? And he was like, nope. And the thing is, like, hey, you got NIL, you got transfer portal, two windows, right? Now they had one, but you had two windows and you got so many things that are going on. Like, why not delegate that? He's like, no, because that's what I was hired to do, is to be a play caller, right? And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But there's another thing that Steve Sarkisian was also hired to do, because it is true to a certain extent that he was hired to be a play caller, right? They liked what they saw at Alabama and him as a play caller there. Probably Alabama more so than the Falcons, right? But Alabama, they liked what they saw there. You saw what he was able to do when he had a bunch of weapons. And it's like, yeah, well, we want you to have that here. But there's also other things that they had hired Steve Sarkisian to do, right? Be a good recruiter, which he has done since he's been here, right? So, but recruiting, because y'all remember that time before Sark got here, and I take you back into the time machine, hop into the DeLorean, put some little trash in the flux capacitor. What was it? Flux capacitor? Put the little trash in there. A capacitor? What was the damn thing was? Flux capacitor? I forget what it was. Anyway, put the trash in. Let's go back in the time machine real quick, because we knew that recruiting in itself was going bad, right? Rocker Meyer twins didn't want to come here, which, by the way, much to do about nothing. Quinn Ewers had decommitted. Right, so recruiting was kind of in the trash. So they wanted him to bring recruiting back here as well, and he's been able to do that. Top 5 teams, right, and top 5 recruiting rankings. Good in transfer portal. So he's been able to do that. So that you check that box of why you were here. You have that play calling box. That's why you're here, and then of course to compete for championships. And it only took a few years, but Steve Sarkisian wins a Big 12 championship in Texas's last year there, right? And then the first year in the SEC, they're competing for an SEC championship, right? So you're checking all the boxes, Coach. You're checking all the boxes as to why you were hired. But there's another box that needs to be checked. It has got to be checked this upcoming weekend. And that box that Steve Sarkisian needs to check going forward is, you got to find a way to beat a top 5 team. Oh, what are you talking about? Steve Sarkisian has got to find a way to beat a top 5 team. Okay, here you go. So I went and I looked through a lot of the UT material this week as I was studying up for the game. And I came across a stat that shocked me when I came across it, right? Which, by the way, is kind of the redundancy part of the redundancy. I came across a stat that shocked me when I came across it. All right, well, again, excuse my public school education, all right? that all of us could go to private school. I was just happy to get into a school and graduate with my 2.4 GPA, or whatever the hell I may have had back then. But let's look at the Sark's record. It's so self-deprecating humor. Sometimes they say is the best one, right? It's more so than the first couple of things that you're seeing, right? Go to that bottom portion of it. This is the stats that really jumped out to me. When you saw Sark's record at Texas versus unranked teams, you see 31-6. It gets interesting, though, because his record versus top 25 teams is 500. 14-13, just a game above 500, okay? His record versus top 20 teams is 10-13 at Texas. As the competition starts rising up, the record starts getting a little bit worse. When you get to the top 15 teams, his record is 6-12 at Texas. That's a -6 thing. And then top 5 teams, he's 5-8 versus top 5 teams. Again, the more the competition goes up, the more the losing occurs. And then the creme de la creme, the number that jumps out of all of them, the Sark's record versus top 5 teams is actually 1-6 at Texas. You're like, what the hell? Yeah, that's the number that jumped out to me when I started doing the research. 1-6 at Texas. So you said, all right, well, I'm always that person. Y'all ever see like ESPN, if you remember having it before YouTube TV and stuff? Yeah, you know, like once a year or so, there will always be a high school basketball team that scored 100 points, and it'd be like 100-2. I've always been fascinated how the 2 points were scored. I've always just wanted to, if I had just unlimited money, I would literally do like a documentary, and I would literally just do a documentary on how the 2 points were scored. Like just a team getting their ass kicked and how the 2 points were scored. Anyway, I say it all to say, when I saw 1-6, I said, well, hell, who's the one? And so I had to go back, do some more original research. Here we go. So when we get into Sark versus top 5 opponents at Texas, here we go. The first one was a loss versus number 1 Alabama, 20-19. We all remember that because that's the game the majority of us said, hey, if Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt in this game, Texas probably wins. That's the way we always felt that way. We always felt that way. It happened. Damn it. The second loss occurred versus TCU in their miracle run that year. And one day there'll be a documentary on that, but we'll get into that another day. 2023, you have the win versus Alabama. So the thing that we thought would have happened in 2022 ends up happening in 2023. Go on the road, 10-point victory. But then what happens later in the bowl game, Sugar Bowl, Texas loses that 37-31. We all remember getting down to the out in the red zone, having the opportunities to score, and Texas not being able to score during that game. Texas loses against Washington. 2024, Georgia twice, one in the regular season, one, of course, in the SEC championship game. And then to start out this year, the loss versus Ohio State. And that brings us to 1-6. And that's when it becomes, to me, very obvious, very paramount that when we start talking about things that need to happen this upcoming weekend, and we start talking about Georgia, one of the things I had talked about before the season, but it's obviously we're kind of repeating, is Sark by no stretch of the imagination is in any kind of job jeopardy, right? Let's not be ridiculous or anything to that effect. But the thing I did say before is that he is in danger of certain things becoming a thing. It's only a thing when it happens repeatedly, right? And if you don't beat Ohio State in the season opener, now that's a thing. Steve Sarkisian can't beat Ryan Day. That becomes a thing. If you lose to Georgia, again, third time in the last 2 years, it's Steve Sarkisian can't beat Kirby Smart. That becomes a thing. I had said, if you lose in the SEC championship game, that becomes a thing. Right now, you're hoping that Texas gets to the SEC championship game, and there's some dominoes that got to fall as relates to that, but you're hoping that occurs. And then, of course, if you lose in the semifinals again, that becomes a thing, right? And so now again, we gotta walk before we get to any of that. Crawl before we walk before we run. This thing for Sark, this can't be a thing. We can't have a time, an era, anything where we're looking at that record versus top 5 teams. And why I'm bringing up top 5? Because Georgia's a top 5 team. And this becomes a huge test for Sark this weekend. A obstacle that he needs. You got to get to 2. You're at 1. You got to get to 2. And yes, it did happen a couple of years ago versus Alabama, and that's what needs to occur again for him, or else, again, there's no job jeopardy here. There's nothing like that, right? But it just becomes that narrative of, oh my gosh, even Ryan Day, of course, going into last year and probably going into after Michigan, people, they wanted Ryan Day fired. But even Ryan Day, as he's getting into November, Michigan, that's a thing. That's a thing. And he's got to figure out, okay, what am I going to do in order to get over this Michigan hurdle? Sark's got to figure out what he's got to do to get over that Georgia hurdle, that Kirby Smart hurdle. So we're not sitting here on Saturday night after the game, which, by the way, post-game show sponsored by my main man, Adam Lowy, live on YouTube right here on this channel. 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. If you are at home watching the game, again, hope you may not be watching it on YouTube TV, which, by the way, I'm doing like a trial with this, what is it called? Fubu. I don't even know how the hell. I'm doing a little trial with them, hoping that I don't have to cancel my YouTube at this moment, but it may have to happen. We're hoping that when we're having this game, we're not talking about another loss that's there. Rodolfo, sorry, I wouldn't say he's overrated. Let's not go that far. But I think the easiest thing to say, Rodolfo, is there's room for improvement. That's all. I don't think we have to go anything harder. Like we could just stay in a middle ground here of there's room for improvement, but we don't have to go into a definitive he sucks or excuse making. We can just stay right here in the middle. Ben G, how are you going to get ESPN? That's the only question. I know you got an antenna, but how do you get an ESPN? By the way, if y'all got some bootleg ways and just to get everything for free, and I'm not gonna get a virus. I mean, y'all feel free to email your NFL Onward at yahoo.com. I'll take it. Now the thing is, this is such a much must win, not only for Sark but for the program, because I think there's this natural assumption that I've seen, whether it's on Orange Bloods, what I've seen on the shows that I do here. It's like this natural assumption that, well, you know what? Even if Texas loses to Georgia, they just beat Texas A&M and we're in. Like, well, okay, potentially, but one, I don't know if we can make that an automatic assumption. Two, why play with fate? Three, why tempt the committee? And four, if you lose to Georgia, why automatically assume you're going to beat Texas A&M? That's just, and it's like, well, the game's at home. I mean, okay, but this for me is, can a 9-3 team make it in? Well, right now, if you look at the rankings right now, and in fact, I'll put these up. I'm going to put this up right now for y'all. Hope y'all doing good, man. I see y'all very active in the chat. I appreciate it. And everything that you guys are saying right there. Benji, you're gonna listen it on the radio. Benji, you might be on to something. You might be on to something. Hell, we all got Sirius XM or something. Maybe we're on to something. Maybe you're on to something. I don't know. It's kind of like they just take pride in knowing that most people don't like to switch things. It's kind of like your bank. Most of us have been with the same bank for years because we just don't want to switch. It's not like we love our bank. It's just like we just don't want to feel like going through all the hassle of switching. This is kind of like that. When you look at the CFP rankings that came out last night, there are two teams that with 3 losses that are ranked. Iowa at 21, Tennessee at 23. Those are the teams that have 3 losses. Everybody else is in that 2-loss category. My thing is, when I looked at it, if for some reason Texas loses that game this upcoming weekend, well, then they get dropped back. They've got to get dropped back. How far? If Oklahoma, and again, we'll get into some of the stuff. If Oklahoma wins against Alabama, which I would like to say, well, you like to say, oh, is that going to happen? Well, I don't know, because it happened last year, but we'll see what happens. Texas has got to drop back some. And if they drop back some, and again, I don't know how far back they go. Did they go past a Miami? Certain things. I'm not quite 100% sure. Like I said, the Arkansas game won't move the needle. The Arkansas game won't do anything for the committee. And then the A&M game at that point has to be something that the committee just says, that was all we needed to put a 3-loss team in. And I don't trust the committee enough to say to myself, I know for sure this thing was going to happen. To me, if you're Texas, you get that Georgia win this weekend. First of all, on GP. Just on GP alone, you get that Georgia win this weekend. And then you stack that win with the Arkansas win. And then you give yourself a little bit of cushion. The same way like Texas Tech has a little bit of cushion at this moment, where if Texas Tech loses a game, do they fall into that 11th spot? The 11th spot is that tricky spot that you don't necessarily want to be in, because if you're in that 11th spot, you're usually in that first team out kind of thing. Let me see if I could find the thing from last night. Let's see if someone put it up there. I don't know what folder this thing ends up being in. But any case, Oklahoma ended up being first team out yesterday within this thing because you got to put the group of 5 in. ACC is potentially in there as well. So, we have you have that. So that's for me. Like, there can't be like you just don't want to f around and find out. If you're just being quite honest, if you're Texas, you just want to make sure you stack it. You stack it early, and kind of go from there. You kind of go through here. There weren't a ton of surprises with the Ohio States, the Indiana was in there. Of course, Texas A&M at number 3, and it's interesting because I heard Lane Kiffin make a claim that maybe Texas A&M could be the number 1 team in the country. So there was that. Oh, and here we go. This is what I was looking for. I wanted to see where this thing was stuck at. I had to go through 800 folders to find this. That's probably why I heard that clicking there. This is what the playoff bracket looked like last night when it came out. And right now, again, when Texas ends up moving in there into that spot, Miami as an ACC team was at the 11th spot. South Florida, my South Florida Bulls were at the 12th spot. And who was it yesterday? Somebody asked me yesterday about South Florida. And I said, nah, I didn't think so. Maybe it might be James Madison or something like that. I don't, whoever asked me that yesterday, kudos to you. I just can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Mark Anthony had asked that or Ben. It may be Ben had asked that. Vivek, I don't know. It was really active. So you could see how the rankings were yesterday, and this was the playoff bracket when that thing came out. Again, Texas. So we clear. Texas is like literally just flirting with it. They're in. We would have another trip to Mississippi. Who can't wait for that? Another trip to Mississippi. Which that's okay. Actually, I had a good time in Mississippi. But you know what? And by the way, sidebar, all y'all, if I was you and you're thinking about traveling, if I was you, I would make reservations for Texas Tech for that weekend. I'd make reservations for Ole Miss that weekend as well. Just because, these cities that are smaller, those hotels book up pretty fast. And so that now you don't want to be spending $500 a night on a Red Roof Inn or a Fairfield. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how they jack you like that. So what you really want to make sure is reserve it now where it's $150 a night, whatever the case may be. So then therefore, if you decide to go, you're clear and you're not spending a ton of money. I know most of you guys will probably stay at home and probably choose to go to like the quarterfinal games. Might be a little bit better, but yeah. And Patrick, just to answer your question, because they're still putting like the highest ranked ACC team in there, and so that's how Miami gets in there because you still got to have your power fours represented. So they're putting the highest ranked ACC team, and that's why Miami shoots up to 11. And then you have your group of 5 team that is there at the 12th spot. So that's what makes it tough. That's why Oklahoma could be ranked 11th, but they're the first team out because essentially you still got to put 2 other teams in there. That's how it's a crazy thing, but that's the scenario, right? So if the season ended today, you got South Florida versus Georgia, you'd have Notre Dame versus Oregon, you'd have Miami going to Texas Tech. That'd be a culture shock for some of them. I mean, that'd be a culture shock for some folks. They're like, where the hell are we? Lubbock, Texas. What? Anyway, if we were drinking, if we were off the record, I'd have way more jokes. But I have a general rule of thumb. My general rule of thumb is when it comes to like tweeting, anytime you think you're going to say something that's really funny, you should probably delete it. And it's sometimes on the show, sometimes if I think, well, I'm going to say something that's really funny, I'm like, I'm going to shut the hell up before I get canceled. And then we got Texas at Ole Miss with the winner facing Indiana in a bowl game. Miami Tech facing, by the way, Texas Tech versus A&M would be fun as hell to watch because I know those two teams don't like each other. And of course, Notre Dame versus Oregon, that winner placing Ohio State. And of course, my South Florida Bulls versus Alabama. Okay. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but I'll take it though. I might travel to Athens just now. Of course, I gotta face that stuff there. So let's get into this upcoming weekend. Y'all, I hope everyone's again having a good one. So let's get into the upcoming weekend and what we're watching, what we're going to be looking out for on the schedule. My man Tyler, no, he didn't put Elko this week for the schedule. He usually has a really bad Elko shot in there, and I can't tell if it's on purpose or not. But here it is. We got South Carolina at Texas A&M, and that's just for the upset factor, more so than anything else. Not like we actually believe South Carolina would do anything, but who among us would not buy Shane Beamer a steak dinner whenever he came to Texas, Austin, Austin, Houston, Dallas, on a recruiting visit, if that was able to happen? But nonetheless, we got South Carolina at A&M. We've got Arkansas at LSU. No one gives a damn. You've got Tennessee Tech at Kentucky. We don't care. The interesting game that we'll be watching is going to be Oklahoma at Bama. That's that. If Oklahoma loses, that's probably an elimination game for them. They're done, more than likely. As far as the playoffs are concerned, it's going to be hard for them at that point. If Oklahoma beats Alabama, that makes things way more that makes things way more hectic. Because they're definitely jump up there. You got New Mexico, and I'll tie that in a second. New Mexico State versus Tennessee. We don't care. We got Florida at Ole Miss. Florida dumpster fire. Mississippi State at Missouri. Nobody cares. And then you've got. I mean, I'm sure their parents care, and maybe there's some of their friends and students at Missouri who need something to do, but nobody really cares. And then we got Texas at Georgia, which obviously we care about as well. And I got to get my guy Dash on the show Friday. I gotta make sure I do something with him. So it becomes interesting because that Oklahoma Bama game. You probably if Bama goes ahead and knocks off Oklahoma, then you don't really have to worry about Oklahoma in any kind of tiebreaker situations at that point. But then again, and I go back to, but then Texas has to win. Texas has to beat Georgia. Like there is no dancing around it and hoping for the best. Like if you are Texas, what you don't want to do, you want the committee to tell you at 10-2, this is why you can't make it in, as opposed to 9-3. 10-2, you get in. 10-2, it's a no-brainer. 10-2, that means you have defeated another top-ranked team. Actually, you ran the table throughout the rest of the schedule. That's fine. That's easy. That no one's denying that. Hell, you might be able to host a game. But once anything else puts it in a dangerous territory. So Steve Sarkisian this weekend, he's got to shake this. He's got to shake that record. He's got to find a way to pull off the victory against Georgia, a top 5 team. It can't be, well, whenever we face teams that are really good, we don't win. It's got to be, no. Sark, I know what you said. You said you were hired as a play caller. Yeah. You also were hired as a recruiter. Yeah. Done a great job with that is concerned. You were hired to compete for championships, and Texas is doing that right now. Yep. But you also were hired to beat the elite teams on the schedule. That's the thing you got to do. That's the thing that has to happen. And that's the thing that you, me, all of us will be waiting to see and hoping like hell it does happen. Because if it does, everything remains on the table. If it doesn't, you get into a really weird minutia, potpourri, crock pot, like kind of thing, casserole of stuff that if you Texas, you don't want to have to be a part of, you don't want to be in. So let's see what happens. Jeff Ketchum's going to have more. He's done a little. He took my idea and he ran with it. He's going to have more of that this upcoming weekend at noon. Actually, I will have some more stuff that's here. I'm done. Make sure you go out, have a fantastic day. But I would always say, live each day like it was your last one day. It will be. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have prize picks. I gotta call Dash, see if I could get him on here as well. Texas Georgia week. It's time to put them dogs in the crate.